one of my personal favorites right now, David, as far as investment asset classes, is going to be a short-term rental. The VRBO Airbnb space. You and I have talked offline about that. We've got some great videos coming up here in the next couple of weeks talking specifically about STR space. What are your thoughts on that? Is that an asset class that you guys actively invest in?
Absolutely. We actually we focus on short-term rentals and actually do quite well with it, quite honestly. So there's an abundance amount. If it was actually 2-3 years ago, basically nobody was really focused on specifically with short-term rentals. The great thing about us, our program, is that we're able to actually get people in the door with short-term rentals without actually having a long-term lease in place and qualifying on the property in itself based on few criterias. And, as you guys know this space quite well. Okay. So one of the things is what we focus on is we use a couple of sources of websites such as airdna.co. We take they compiled a lot of data in the past of what specific properties in that area and what they actually generate or have generated in the past, because most of these platforms for short-term rentals, everything's calculated, right? Everything, the metadata is there. So all they need to do is look at what the metadata looks like for that specific property, and they can determine how much this property is actually generating as far as income. So there are a lot of properties out there that actually do quite well if you focus on the key areas of where people want to go when it comes to short-term rentals, little short-term vacations, if you will. So with that being said, we take 80% of what AirDNA states your yearly income would be for that property. Or if you're refinancing one of your Airbnb properties, we would take your last 12 months of your income, of generated income, and we actually take 80% of that. So we don't care about what you spent and whatnot or all your other expenses. We just tax it by 20%. We reduce it by 20% to focus on that, because quite honestly, if you're doing real estate right, you're investing it right, you're probably writing off a lot more than that, right? So we as a private lender, we know that whether it be your short-term rentals or your long-term rentals, we know that you're gonna depreciate and write off a lot of expenses for that particular property, especially for your first few years. But we don't tax you on that. We don't hit you on any of that specific. We don't look at your expenses on the property. We just focus on what your taxes are, what your insurance is, and if it's if it's within an HOA, we look at what your HOA is. So from that, those three key elements of your three expenses focus has a lot to do with everything else, right? And it's going to be a lot less burdensome when we actually qualify that property, because we're not looking at your tax returns. We're not taking off what your net is looking like, right? So we look at just specifically the property, what it generates, and what are your expense, your three major expenses, or I should say four, because you have principal and interest as well. So those four key elements itself will dictate everything.
So what I'm hearing is that you guys, whether it's a short-term, a short-term rental, whether it's a long-term buy and hold, whether it's a fix and flip, you guys, they can find a home there and get financing for those projects through you guys. What type of projects do you not want to see come across your desk? Are there some out there that have too much hair on them? Just so if people are watching, they say, hey, I potentially have this project, but I'm going to go ahead and eliminate myself because David said, those are not projects that they specifically want to look at. Do you have maybe one or two of those that you would not, entertain?
Sure. So I would probably say that I would stay away from we're not a venture capitalist. I get emails all the time with inquiries of venture capital, or specifically private equity. We get a lot of inquiries about private equity, and that's not what we do. We don't actually offer it. We don't actually partner up with specific investors to go in and actually do a specific home investment or anything like that. That's not what we do. We're just strictly a debt lender.
Got it. Okay, and that's a really important for people to understand the distinctions between the two. You know, when you hear hard money, institutional, conventional, private lending, private equity, a lot of those can be really confusing to folks. I think that you've done a really good job of kind of mapping those out today and giving us the distinctions and giving our audience the distinctions on those, David. We always like to talk on the channel when we bring experts on like you. Who's a good fit for your program, and who wouldn't be a good fit? Who should be watching right now and say, this is right in my wheelhouse. Let me go ahead and reach out to David and his team and talk about next steps moving forward. Or if they're watching, who would you say, this is probably not in their wheelhouse and maybe it would be spinning their wheels?
Sure. If it was 5 years ago, I would probably say if you haven't actually done a fix and flip or purchase a property in the last few years ever, or even ever, I would probably say we wouldn't be a fit for you, right? However, things have changed. Private money has been a lot more easier to actually acquire nowadays. Obviously, and potentially not at the highest leverage of most people think, oh, I want to buy an investment property for 0% financing. 100% financing, right? Yeah, not going to happen.
If you guys have that program, I'm all in right now. I can tell you, customer.
I'm sure I would too. I'd be like, yeah, let me change my profession. Let me actually get into doing this full time just along with you. But yeah, I mean, we get actual beginners all day long, consistently now, more and more for the last probably about the last 3 years. Okay, got a lot more beginners, and they all start off with us, right? They could actually go with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and all that stuff. But here's the reason why they actually chose us, is that we don't verify income. We don't really truly verify assets, where the money came from. You mentioned about debt weapons before. We don't care where the money came from, okay? We want to see that the money's in your bank account, however. We want to make sure that you're not embezzling money. We want to make sure that it's not coming from overseas and all that stuff, which is fine as long as it's documentable, documented correctly. But other than that, all we care about is making sure that you can come to the table with the funds that you need to purchase that property. You'll have enough reserves in place. So if any hiccups arise, we want to make sure that you actually have some sense of collateral in your bank account just for the rainy day. But beyond that itself, investors from, no properties whatsoever to as much as investors that, they don't have time to actually purchase property, go through 30 to 60 days and go through their tax returns. If you're a serious investor, you don't want to go through all your taxes. It's like on every single property, right? And you're going to be obviously limited. Even for beginners, sometimes nowadays, a lot of you have money and you make money, but it's your taxes that won't dictate what you actually truly make, right? So we focus on the key areas of we only focus on the actual property itself and how it's generating money. We don't really focus on what your actual income is in the past or what it is in the future. We don't ask tax returns, pay stubs, or anything like that. So that's a key element when it comes to the benefit with us, is that we don't care about any of that stuff. I wouldn't say we don't care about it, but our focus is not there. Our focus is on the actual property itself. And if you can actually show us that you can generate revenue on that property, and it makes a good cash flow, that's the whole premise, is cash flow. And if it does, then you have our blessing, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's important to know. So, it's not just kind of a blanket statement where, if this, then go ahead and disqualify yourself. Sounds like you guys have different entry points just based on experience, based on credit. Obviously, there's going to be a range of terms, and that's going to be with any lending, guys. It doesn't matter if you're going to Fannie, Freddie, you're going to fortknox Capital. There's going to be a range, and it's going to depend on your specific situation. What I love about the private lending, though, is that they're more focused on the actual asset itself. And then it's a math problem, guys. And we talk about math here on the channel all the time. It's just taking the data, and this is a very data-driven industry. And at the end of the day, if you guys crunch those numbers and it makes sense, then you can put a deal together with them. So if you're watching, you don't have to have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 deals under your belt. Now that's going to help your cause, obviously. But if you're just getting started, don't disqualify yourself because you don't have those deals. Reach out to David and his team. At least have that consultation call with them. Doesn't cost you a nickel. And see if it's a good fit for you, good fit for them. Usually that can take place within the first 3 to 5 minutes. People can find out, and David and his team can find out whether or not it's worth additional conversation. And then he'll obviously share with you what next steps will look like at this point. David, I appreciate you sharing that, guys. We love bringing content like this here on the channel. If you're not a subscriber already, go ahead and subscribe and ding that bell notification below. That's going to give you the heads up as we bring additional information here on the VIP channel, like David and his team. So thanks for joining us, guys. The VIP Financial Education, where we help you go further, faster financially. Until next time, take care and make it a great day.